Okay. I see people are logging in, so we just take a moment.
While answering questions, should I keep the presentation open or stop sharing? Okay.
Whatever you prefer. Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. We'll start the webinar in a moment. We're just waiting for people to log in. There's a big crowd. Okay. Okay, let's get started. So, hello everyone, and welcome to today's GALA webinar. My name is Isabella Massard. I'm content strategist here at GALA, and today's webinar is presented by Atis Irmakli from Multilingual Connections, and she'll talk about an AI project following the agile methodology. As always, feel free to use the Q&A box for your questions as you think of them. And the webinar, as you know, will be recorded. The recording will be published on our website. I'll send you a follow-up email with the link as soon as it is available. And that's it for me. Atis, I'm going to give the floor to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Isabel. Hello, everybody. Today, as you know, we're going to be taking a look at a case study on adapting to the agile framework. And but before we dive into any of that, let me introduce myself. I am a project manager at Multilingual Connections, and I have been working as a PM for over 3 years now, and my responsibilities include overseeing various types of projects, translation, transcription, multimedia, and language technology projects. I'm also a master's student in digital humanities program at Riga Technical University, and I'm currently writing my thesis on agile project management in the LSP industry. And it's a pleasure to see you all here with me today. And as I said, I'm working at Multilingual Connections, and Multilingual Connections is a Chicago area translation agency that provides translation, transcription, subtitles, voiceover, quality to resource support, and interpretation services in over 75 languages. And the headquarters are located in Chicago, as I said, but our team is very international and quite remote, actually. We are across 7 different countries and across multiple time zones. And today, before we dive into the webinar, let's take a brief look at how today will go. And for those who might not be so familiar with the Agile framework, I will be giving a very brief introduction on what it's like, and hopefully it will be of help here. And later on, I will be providing some contextual details in terms of the project that is the main actor of today's case study. And afterwards, we'll be taking a look at a bigger picture, how agile adoption happened, and what were the differences compared to a traditional process. And lastly, we're going to be talking about some key takeaways that we got and we have realized along the way. The story of agile, I'm sure some of you already know, and I'll keep it brief, but the story of agile all started back in 2001 when a small group of innovative people got together to try to find a way of think about problems in the software development. And the first thing they did was come up with a set of 4 core values that are coming to successful teams and their projects, which they called the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. You can see the values on the left: individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And hopefully at the end of this webinar, all of these values will make sense even in the context of an LSP project for you. And as I said, it's initially created for software development, and it's a set of methods and methodologies that help a team to think and work more effectively and make better decisions. But Agile is also a mindset because the attitude and the mindset of a team can make a big difference in how effectively they can use all those principles and practices those methodologies consist of. And of course, the project can go through different types of life cycles. And in our industry, we usually depend on predictive life cycle, or in other words, waterfall process. We plan upfront and then execute all the steps in a sequential manner. And we talk to the client at the beginning and maybe a few times throughout the process via email, maybe not even talk at all. And then we just deliver the files at the end. And I'm sure there are exceptions to this depending on the request type or clients. But in a general sense, I think it's safe to assume that we follow a traditional predictive life cycle. And iterative and incremental life cycles are slightly different. Iterative one allows feedback on unfinished work, and incremental one allows finished deliverables to be delivered to the customer, which they might use immediately, even the project is still in progress. And when we say agile, we actually mean an approach that is both iterative and incremental, which allows team members to refine work items based on feedback and deliver working software more frequently. Now, all those life cycles might seem like they might not work for LSP businesses, that the client drops the translation, maybe localization project on us and then accepts the 100% finished work. But this is actually not the case all the time, especially in the cases of cooperation with AI companies for those type of language technology projects. We can actually follow an agile lifecycle along with them. And we, as a company, we found it to be very productive and quite refreshing compared to the usual processes that our business is used to. And agile primarily comes from lean thinking, which is a whole topic on its own that we won't go into today. But you can see the amount of different methodologies under one blanket term that is called agile. And according to the industry data, Scrum is the most popular one. And we can say that the case study today also had lots of elements from Scrum methodology, even though it wasn't officially communicated to us when we got started with the project. Now, to provide a bit of project context, there were multiple stakeholders, and the main client was a State Department of Employment Security in the US, and we were the language service provider. And there were also 3 other companies providing different layers of development, either primary development or backend support or product or data solutions support. And the main goal of the project was to help out the department responsible for helping the public in terms of unemployment or related benefits. And because of the increase in calls and questions due to the COVID-19, there was a need to develop a system that can pet the front line from those incoming calls that would reach the humans actually working in the department. And the state also cared a lot about the linguistic diversity given their population, and wanted to develop those systems in different languages, which you can see on the right. We had Spanish, Polish, Hindi, traditional and simplified Chinese, and for the interactive voice agent, we also had Mandarin and Cantonese. You can see a whole diagram here. It was actually created by the primary AI company that we closely worked with. And you can see our role in the whole development process clearly. Initially, it was providing the human review of all the machine translated text and speech in all capacity that would be used for training the language models. And those models would create the linguistic capability of the chatbot and the virtual call center agent that they were trying to develop. And beyond the text review, we also provided different types of services where it was relevant, and some linguistic and cultural guidance. And this whole process is called human in the loop process, which refers to a branch of AI that brings together AI and human intelligence to create machine learning models. And that's where our role as an LSP came in. And as you can see, this is a very short, brief overview of the services that we provided. We started with the MTP service, and after that, we created training data for them in all those languages on top of the existing data that they already had. And once the prototypes were developed, we performed a user acceptance testing. And then we also provided some QA calls in which some final troubleshooting had to be done because of some resisting issues. And with the final revisions being completed, we actually finished the whole project, and the real product, the real chatbot and the IVR system were up and running. And it all took 3 months to complete all the languages and each product to be developed in each language. Now, does this seem like a predictive project lifecycle to you, or maybe in other words, waterfall? As a reminder, it's a more traditional approach with the bulk of planning upfront, and it's happening in a sequential manner. And if your answer is yes to this question, maybe you have thought about the process in a manner like this. We would have a briefing meeting with the client, laying out expectations, being given a deadline or instructions, and overall discussing capacity and capabilities. And maybe in some projects, this wouldn't even happen. Whatever info that is required could have been passed summarily via email. And once we get the project rolling, we would assign all the tasks for all languages, and they would all work on their own respective language in an individual and isolated manner. And after that, we would deliver the work, and they would develop the products, maybe no meetings in between. And once they share the prototype with us, our linguists would work with it, providing some input and feedback, applying some revisions, and then the project will be completed. Again, maybe no more meetings happening unless there's an emergency or a delayed type of communication, such as emails, would take place. And we would get maybe questions from the client or the linguist and pass it on in between them as the PM right in the middle of it. And in light of all of that, if you take a look at the process with the characteristics of a predictive life cycle in mind, this is how it might look like. We would have detached interactions. PM will be the only contact for everyone, for clients, developers, or linguists. The process might have happened simultaneously, all languages getting kicked off all at the same time in a sequential process. And if there are any errors, mistakes, or unforeseen circumstances in any place other than the source text, we would only discover those at the end. And there will be planning upfront. If we or the linguist are estimating anything wrongly or maybe not 100% perfectly, this again gets discovered only when we approach the last day or that particular hour of the estimation. And the clients or the stakeholders only happens, their involvement only happens when required or where relevant, maybe at the beginning or the end for support, or maybe during the process via email. And in a predictive life cycle, unless it's a creative work or a project that has more of a relaxed turnaround time, we might not get a say in timeline or selectional work. We might not have a position to make any suggestions. We will be maybe expected to merely provide as the provider. And we wouldn't necessarily present any work till the actual delivery unless specifically asked for. And if there's any mistake, we might not be aware of it unless we do a very thorough QA process in-house or we speak that particular language in-house. And we usually provide revisions when the client expresses the need coming back after the project completion. And that would be the only feedback loop we might have. We can, of course, make suggestions even along the way, but not every client can or wants to implement those. So those will be the characteristics of how things really run in a very traditional sense in our industry. But the actual project process looked like this. Now, these little rows that you're seeing represent how a sprint in agile cycle looks like. We will dive into what those arrows mean in a bit shortly, but in Scrum terminology, sprint means a short time-boxed period when a team works to complete a set amount of work. And in this project, we had 3 sprints that took 3 to 4 weeks in total in each sprint, and we had meetings twice a week with all stakeholders involved and present, providing updates, asking questions, clarifying any confusion, and displaying the revised action items and the timeline. Such bi-weekly meetings already created the feedback loop on a regular basis for this project, and everything was being refined based on the feedback being provided in each meeting. We started with MTP, having the 4 languages being done, and Spanish was the most urgent one, and that's the language that kicked off as the first one. But if you can follow the bullet points, you can actually see how Spanish and Polish got into development first, and then that was followed by Hindi, that was followed by simplified Chinese, and eventually traditional Chinese, going through each different phase of the process. And we first finished Spanish and Polish, and then Hindi, Mandarin, and Cantonese as well. Now, if we take a look at the differences when it comes to waterfall and agile, let's break it down between them in a more clear way. Let's take communication as the first item. And in terms of communication a lot among LSPs and clients and LSPs and linguists, this is how it will look like in a sequential process. As the PM, like I said, you're usually the one main point of contact with the client. You might not get involved in their daily meetings or weekly meetings, just get updates from them after each meeting via email. And maybe you wouldn't even talk to the development team. You might be only in touch with the sales or project management team of that client. And like we mentioned before, we usually get instructions or deadlines to work with, and we will be passing it on to the linguist. And isolated linguists, linguists working as in an isolated manner, would ask the PM their questions or make suggestions or ask for context or references, which PM again delivers back to the client. No meetings happening, and there can always be a potential for delays with only one person or one role connecting people and facilitating the communication. However, in an agile sense, this is how it looked like in this particular project. As I mentioned earlier, we were involved in every single stakeholder meeting, and we were treated as one of the team players for the project success. Having everyone present in a live meeting twice a week has been very helpful in terms of communication efficiency, in terms of resolving things quickly, and there were also 2 other communication spaces happening all at the same time. We were talking to the linguists on a day-to-day basis, keeping in touch, asking for availability or capacity, scheduling or arranging things or reprioritizing things or providing timeline updates or any changes that we took in that particular bi-weekly meeting that we had. We also created communication channels where linguists could talk to each other. And additionally, another communication space involved the clients and the development team and us along with our linguists during live troubleshooting sessions. And you can probably already see what Agile Manifesto meant for individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Communication is happening in the most efficient way possible, preferably face-to-face, but of course, in this particular project context, it was face-to-face through virtual call. Now, the differences between these 2 different approaches are most clear in terms of planning, estimation, and process. I did say that we were going to look into what those arrows meant in Scrum methodology, and you can already see the labels. Each one represents a step of a sprint process. We would plan for a language to be worked on that will include our services. The development team would implement whatever we provided into their systems, and there will be a review phase where linguists would take a look at the prototype that they developed. And finally, we would have a retrospective in which whatever lessons or takeaways that are learned along the way are discussed among us as the language provider and the development team and the client. And daily Scrum refers to a short daily meeting in which all team members talk about the action items, updates, and discuss new assignments. And at the end, we would have a completed work or product, and this would only be a certain part of a working software. But in our case, of course, this was basically only 1 or 2 languages that was coming out of that process. And this whole sprint process helps us catch the errors and the mistakes or unforeseen circumstances, unforeseen need for services or different services or early on in the process. And our linguists realized certain challenges, for example, with accent while testing the virtual call agent, and the accent wouldn't either get picked up or it would get misunderstood. And they immediately told us, which we could communicate to the development team in those bi-weekly meetings. And it turned out to be a lack of data issue on a particular accent or a dialect. And even though the source text, for example, was different for speech and text, even though they were practically asking the same question or providing the same answer, some of this didn't really make sense across all languages. And this needed adaptation, which again, our linguists realized very early on, and we could catch it again early on in the process. And the development team provided the prototype chatbot to us, and thinking only we would need to check the prototype from a linguistic aspect of it. When our linguists expressed concern over some of the design elements, we could talk to them immediately. For example, there was the Chinese case. They were using the Chinese flag for both China and Taiwan, and the client realized that this might have a very nuanced situation, and we provided some feedback on how this could have been tackled. And the client also realized that they actually needed us to provide some UX design guidance, both linguistically and also culturally. They also set up a number for all international calls to go through to be able to test the virtual agents. And but it didn't really work from a technical perspective, and we had to act quickly. In that scenario, for example, we as MLC stepped in to create a more custom solution for this. And as you can see, all those errors or needs came up during a process, and those bi-weekly meetings were absolutely crucial for everything to be communicated quickly. It led to quick reaction times, which resulted in efficiency increase across all teams working on the project. And it also helped our development team or us to develop quick and targeted solutions because everyone could get the big picture, having the entire context thanks to those meetings. For example, we were the ones flagging the accent issue that later had to be resolved between two different AI companies providing two different solutions to tackle such issues. And this is why the presence of everybody is important, because of that shared communication happening. I mean, imagine this conversation happening only via emails and how delayed it could have potentially become. And the client and the development team originally planned a certain timeline that didn't necessarily have enough considerations for language services to take place. And we had to reset those expectations for the estimation there. In agile methodology, estimations are treated as facts to be discovered later. And this means that estimations are made for the first sprint and product log using previous project info if available. For example, if this type of a project already happened before, they can maybe take that as a basis. But those estimations are never set in stone and they can change based on that particular project. That is why the room for change is always provided and it's always there. And every estimation after the first sprint uses this historical data with the first sprint to base the estimations in the next sprint. And in our case, the development team already left room for change because of this principle, and we readjusted everything that would allow for a potential change and something, a more healthy work balance on the linguist side as well. For example, we had to do it once for Spanish and the rest followed course because they quickly realized that they might have not got the estimates right for the rest of the languages as well. And we also had to inform them of the recruitment process that we needed to do for this project and the challenges that came with it and reprioritize work. While Simplified Chinese was supposed to be developed before traditional Chinese, we asked for the switch because of the ongoing recruitment processes and more informed and available team, and this got implemented immediately. So as you can see, in terms of planning, estimation, and process, there are a lot of differences when it comes to waterfall versus agile. And also, the project was looking like uh, a product line in a factory. Imagine realizing those errors, mistakes, and needs for the first language and immediately re-switching position to anticipate the changes for the next language coming up. And the development team was feeding each language into a process. As you can see, we started with Spanish and the Polish and Hindi and Chinese, and each language went through every single step of the process, which is again listed as a refresher on the left. And going through, MTP, training data creation, development, and UX advice, and so on and so forth. And while Spanish was in the development, Polish had training data phase. And when Hindi was being troubleshooted, we were doing UAT with Polish and so on and so forth. So the development team was feeding each language into a process. And when they were taking the language out, do whatever development that they have to do, and all while having meetings to provide feedback and refine it, and finally feed the same language back into the next step. So this process happened every single week, with multiple languages being worked on, developed, refined, and worked on again. The process also never stopped, because if there was an issue that needed to be addressed, we were working on the next language or the previous step for another language. So everything was both incremental and iterative, and always made sure of continuous improvement through the feedback loops. And in our case, in this particular case, it was meetings or revisions. And other differences can be laid out in terms of involvement, ownership, and collaboration. Our role as a language service provider and the roles of the linguists change from a service provider or a linguist with a set of instructions and a set of deadlines to a subject matter expert who, quote unquote, gave the instructions, advice on reprioritization or selection of work, and the guidance on how the end product should look like. Of course, the process or the eagerness of our clients to treat us as a subject matter expert is also a key element here. But we can see that agile by nature, because of its process, demands all stakeholders and subject matter experts to be involved and to be treated as subject matter experts to be successful if the process really aims to be an agile one. And of course, this enabled us creating such an agile dynamic on our end as well. This helped our linguists to feel more involved, to have a more team spirit and a collective sense of collaboration. We have witnessed more proactive attitudes and more ownership from their end regarding the work that needs to be performed, and more quality work being done as well because of shared communication and shared workspaces among the linguists as well. They themselves would come forward and let us know of their availability or challenges or circumstances that would impact their work. We haven't sat down and explained what agile is to them particularly, yet creating this dynamic resulted in good team-based rhythm that was clearly shared by everybody in a linguist team. And I'm sure in other projects there might be exceptions, which leads to my next point actually, which is recruitment. As for any project, right type of recruitment is crucial. For those type of projects that might require an adoption to an agile process, however, you might need to talk to the potential linguist about the fact that a more non-conventional communication is going to happen and is going to be accepted from them as well. And trying to find more open-minded people who are willing to try new types of workflows could be the key element here. We of course have to write instructions for them for each specific step of the project. And in terms of vendor management, it's also important from a PM perspective to empathize with them while writing those instructions, because just because everything is clear on our end and we could adapt successfully, or we understand how this rhythm really works, or how this new service works, or how these new types of offerings work, doesn't necessarily mean that the linguists themselves would immediately see the whole picture as clearly. And there might be linguists who are willing to try new workflows, try new approaches, or provide their expertise for more tech-based services such as user accepting texting, text testing, but still in the need of an in understanding from their own kind of people, as I call it, if I might say, someone who already works in the industry as them, someone who can lay down the linguist aspect that would impact the technical aspect and how their role as a linguist plays out in this whole process. And a waterfall process might still need new recruitments, of course, but might not necessarily demand as much communication because since it's the traditional way a lot of people are used to this, and they kind of already know how the process really works out. Now, let's take a look at the key takeaways that we got from the whole process. Applying the agile mindset to the file organization and updates is absolutely crucial. Given the amount of meetings that are happening every single week, and on top of it, some email exchange, it's very important to stay on top when it comes to every single change or effort that is being performed. So tracking those iteratively and incrementally in an organized way is important, but at the same time, applying that agile mindset to be quick, concise, and flexible is really important. I personally see it from a user story example. This is a practice in Scrum as well. It's basically a description of features of a software, but they are written in from the perspective of an end user or a user of the system. And everything, all those features should fit on the front of a 3 to 5 index card. So tracking those changes, tracking those efforts in such a way, in a concise and quick way, is very important. And it really plays the whole effort on the PM side in an efficient way as well. And be comfortable working outside of your usual system setup or platform. And you can see the response to change value being practiced here. In our case, we have to stay out of certain platforms that we are using for our processes because of how everything, everything was happening quickly and how quickly we needed to respond what was going on, and we needed more flexibility than the system that we are using sometimes allowed us for. But as long as you are comfortable working outside of your usual system and having that attitude and creating more out of the box solutions, this really helps when it comes to your adoption to an agile process, because the project keeps going on and you might not necessarily have a lot of time trying to set up a process that will look like the agile one when you already have a very traditional system in place. And creating your own agile rhythm with your linguists is also absolutely crucial. Of course, you don't have to have those meetings bi-weekly with your linguist as well. You can if that serves your business needs. But we created that rhythm via email or via chat rooms that we have created in certain systems that we are working on. And that agile rhythm really helped them get into a rhythm both with us, but also both among themselves as well, while working on certain parts of the project that needed to be shared because of the timeline that we were on. And this also, again, brings me to my point of common workspaces. People really collaborate there. People really take up the attitude and the mindset to make the end product as well as possible. Again, this really shows the individuals and interactions over processes value very well in practice. It's important to be an informed human in the human-in-the-loop collaboration, doing our own research and communicating our research to the linguists as well, understanding the technology or the service or the agile mindset that is being practiced in the process. Because while agile might happen in mostly language technology projects, you might have wonderful linguists who can actually have wonderful expertise, both from a linguistic and cultural point of view, but they might have not worked in a language technology before or in an agile manner. So understanding it ourselves and communicating that and empathizing with them from the end user perspective, as I say, or in this case, from the linguist perspective, is absolutely crucial and actually really secured success in this case study for us. Staying open and inviting linguists to be proactive is also really important because they might not see the big picture, as I said, but always asking for more context or insight or advice in the communication, iterating that collaboration aspect really helps them taking up that attitude to be a team player, to be a proactive linguist who doesn't just do what's given to them, but goes beyond that and actually provides their own suggestions. And in a process like this, where you constantly have meetings with your development team and client, it's really important to have that feedback loop open and running with your linguist too. And of course, recruitment is very important. In those live troubleshooting sessions, your role as a subject matter expert really gets passed on to the linguist. We were there in the meeting, we were present, but the engineer team really worked with the linguist directly. And of course, it's important to have people who are ready to be proactive, as I said, and people who can take on the role of a subject matter expert. I kind of think it as someone who can be my coworker for that meeting. Just for this particular meeting or for a particular couple of meetings, can you be my coworker? Can we work together like we are already at the same company? In an in-house manner. I think that mindset can really help when it comes to the recruitment for this type of process. And after all these key takeaways, I think the most crucial one that we have realized is how can those different practices of agile be applied to all types of projects? Because while language technology projects are also getting more and more common in our industry, we still have more linguistic based, more just a translation or a transcription or a localization project happening. So how can we really apply those elements to those projects as well? I think it's really important to think about that. And this might, of course, differ depending on your set of clients, depending on your set of business needs, business practices, or the services that you offer as a company. So these all key takeaways, I think, can really help all of us in the industry to see where we are in terms of adoption or transition process like this, whether we want to do it or whether the whole adoption really helps us, or maybe a hybrid model of that helps us. I think realizing those things, both on a project basis and also on a company basis, can really show us where we can position ourselves and how we can really adopt the whole mindset to our own industry needs. And in conclusion, with this particular project, there was a sentiment analysis process happening, and after those results, we have seen the success rate of 89% to 93% for all languages. And this really helped us see how our linguistic efforts as an LSP really got turned into quantitative data that eventually gave the success rate. And in my opinion, nothing can be more convincing, both for your linguistic efforts, of course, for the actual work that you've done, but also for how well you adopt their system, their process, and how you adopted to that agile workflow that they implemented. And this, for example, in our case, turned into more referrals from those stakeholders that we work with. Once the project was completed, after a while, we actually started getting more referrals because they thought our adoption and our role in the process played out well enough. And that's all I've got to say in terms of our case study today. And if you have any questions, I am more than happy to answer any of them.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Hatis. That was very interesting. Let's see whether there are some questions coming in. Let's just give it a minute. If you want to ask a question to Hatis, you can either drop it in the chat or you can raise your hand and I can open your microphone and you can speak directly with her. And in the meantime, while people are maybe thinking up some questions, I'm going to remind everyone of the next webinars that we have scheduled. On April 6th, we have a free-for-all webinar, so a webinar open to members and non-members that is held by the Interpreting Special Interest Group on interpreting standards current and in the making. And on April 20th, we have a webinar presented by the Dell team on accessibility and localization. And finally, on the 9th of May, we're going to start with our GALA Academy for Q2, and the topic is going to be international SEO, and registration is already open. You can find all the information on our website. There is a question for you, Atis. How did you measure the success rate at the end?
This was actually measured by the development team. For their platform, they also set up a backend system where it was measuring this sentiment analysis of all the real incoming calls were happening. And after a certain amount of calls, they started doing more measurements, see how positive, neutral, or negative those interactions were with the interactive voice agent. And eventually they came up with the percentages themselves, and they also showed those percentages to us for us to be able to see how our help really got turned into real data. So it was nice to see the end result from a measurement benchmark too.
Okay. And now that you've introduced agile in your workflow, are you ever going back to the more traditional, what shall we say, predictive or?
Actually, on a company level, we haven't introduced agile per se yet, but we are actually going to start testing it next week. In fact, next week and a couple of weeks after that, just to see how those elements can really help with more regular, more traditional projects, and see what it's looking like for us.
Okay, you have to keep us posted on the results of
yeah,
your
project. I will do that.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. So thank you again, Atis, for your presentation, and thank you everyone who attended. We would appreciate if you could take just a minute to give us your feedback on today's session. So when I close the webinar, you'll see a form of the post-event survey. If you could fill it in, it'll take just a couple of seconds to give us your feedback, and it would help us refine our webinar program. For the rest, you'll find the follow-up email in your inbox pretty soon with a link to the recording. So for now, have a good day or a good evening, depending on where you are. And I hope to see you soon at another GALA event. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.